She thought I was a clueless mother-in-law. The work-ins kept blocking her shopping sprees. Today, I handed my furious son the new credit card I'd gotten for his wife, along with a year's worth of receipts that told a very different midnight story. The scream that tore through the quiet of my Tuesday afternoon was not born of physical pain, but of profound, entitled frustration. It was a sound that bypassed my ear and went straight for the marrow of my spine. A digital shriek rendered through the tinny speaker of my mobile phone. I can't believe this. Your mother changed the damn password again? My daughter-in-law, Ria, her voice sharp, enough to score diamonds or crack the delicate crystal of my grandmother's vase across the room. I flinched, not at the volume but at the venom. The phone lay on the mahogany side table, a pulsating little rectangle of outrage. I was in the final stage of checkout. She raged, the words tumbling out in a torrent of wounded privilege. The new limited edition Sabyasachi lehengas, the ones with the hand-embroidered peacocks, and the La Mer regimen, the complete regimen, not the trial sizes. My cart was a thing of beauty, and now it's gone, vanished, because she decided to play gatekeeper with her card. This is beyond ridiculous. It's humiliating. I sat in my wingback chair, a book of Tagore's poetry open but unread on my lap. The afternoon sun streamed through the bay window, illuminating motes of dust dancing in a silent, calm ballet, a stark contrast to the tempest in my hand. I watched them drift, these tiny, aimless particles, and found a strange focus in their gentle chaos. For 5 solid minutes, the torrent continued. It was a symphony of complaint conducted with a spiked bat. She wove in creative, swearing, impressive in its bilingual flair, with accusations of control, of me being a dinosaur who doesn't understand modern needs, of deliberately sabotaging her social standing. There were tears now, theatrical sobs that hitched between barbs. All my friends saw I was online. What will I tell them? That my mother-in-law treats me like a child with an allowance? I listened to every hissed syllable, every manufactured gasp of hurt. My face, I hoped, was a placid lake reflecting nothing of the tectonic plates shifting deep within me. At the appropriate intervals, I offered a soft, non-committal, a sound that was neither agreement nor dissent, but a placeholder, a verbal semicolon in her run-on sentence of grievance dot when her anger finally began to cycle back on itself. Sputtering for lack of new fuel, I spoke. My voice was a murmur of honey, warm and thick and deliberately sweet. I understand, Veda. Don't upset yourself so much. These things happen. I'll talk to her, okay? I'll see what's going on. A final petulant sniff. You need to fix this, Mom. It's not fair. I will, Veda. You go have some water. I'll call you later. The line went dead. The silence that followed was immense, a tangible thing pressing against my eardrums. I placed the phone down, the screen darkening, and returned my gaze to the dancing dust. I did not look at the clock. I didn't need to. I knew the chronology of this particular drama. The complaint to me, the mother-in-law, was Act I, the real performance. The grand crescendos was always Act II. Exactly 23 minutes later, it arrived. The front door didn't open. It was assaulted. A furious boom shuddered through the old teak wood, rattling the heavy brass knocker and sending a sympathetic tremor through the entire house. The picture frames in the hallway, black and white portraits of stern ancestors. A cheerful watercolor of Dal Lake chattered against the wall. My son, Arjun, stood in the shattered quiet of the doorway, backlit by the harsh afternoon sun, looking less like my boy and more like an avenging, poorly managed storm. His face was the color of crushed mulberries, veins standing out on his temples and neck in stark, angry relief. His chest heaved as if he'd run the 5 kilometers from his own upscale apartment. In his eyes, I didn't see my thoughtful, an engineering-minded son who used to build elaborate Lego palaces. I saw a man fully and utterly hijacked by a narrative. Mom! The word was a projectile. What the hell is going on? I was at the kitchen counter, deliberately so. I had moved there after the call, a stage manager preparing the set. Before me lay a small mound of fresh coriander, its bright, clean scent a defiance of the coming ugliness. I picked up a stalk, my movements slow, deliberate. "Why did you lock the supplementary card again?" He strode into the living room, his designer sneakers squeaking on the polished marble. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Rhea is a wreck. She's sitting in the car right now, sobbing her heart out. She says you're deliberately humiliating her. Cutting her off in front of everyone? Is that what you want? To prove some kind of point?" He was pacing, a caged panther in a cashmere sweater. His hands chopped the air, punctuating his fury. I listened as I had listened to his, but this time the hurt was different, deeper. This was my flesh and blood, my only child, screaming at me with a stranger's face. The arguments were Rhea's, but the passion, the betrayal in his eyes was terrifyingly his own. I finished rinsing the coriander, shook the water from it with a gentle flick, and laid it on a cotton towel. I then picked up the towel itself, a plain, white piece of linen, and began to dry my hands. Not a quick wipe, but a methodical, finger by finger drying, absorbing every last droplet. It was a minute of pure, quiet theater. When I finally turned to face him, my expression was the calmest lake I could conjure, its surface unrippled by his hurricane. Then I smiled. Not a wide, triumphant grin, just a little one, a faint upturn at the corners of my mouth that didn't reach my eyes. It was the smile of someone who has reached the end of a very long, very tedious road and has finally seen the signpost for the turn she needs to take. "Sit down, Beta," I said, my voice so soft it was almost a whisper. "I don't want to sit down." He barked, but his pacing lost its rhythm, stuttered. The quiet command in my tone, so at odds with his frenzy, was disorienting. "Please," I said, still softly. "Sit. What I have to show you requires a steady heart, and you look like yours is about to beat out of your chest." A war flickered in his eyes between filial habit and his imported rage. Habit, worn smooth by 32 years. 1. He dropped heavily onto the edge of the cream-colored sofa, his body tense, poised to spring back up at the first wrong word. I didn't speak. I walked past him, through the dining area to the large, somewhat kitschy oil painting of a fruit bowl that hung on the far wall. It was a wedding gift from a distant aunt. Airish and sentimental, and I had never liked it. But for the last 15 years, it had served a perfect purpose. I reached behind its gilded frame, found the hidden catch with practiced fingers, and swung it outward on its silent hinges. Behind it was a small gunmetal gray wall safe. Arjun's breath hitched. He knew the safe existed, of course, but he'd never seen me open it for something like this. Its contents were for wills, property papers, my mother's jewelry. The theater of the moment was not lost on him. The absurd fruit bowl, the secret reveal. It forced a pause in his narrative of grievance. The beep of the keypad was loud in the quiet. I dialed the code, not his birthday, not my husband's, but the date my father had bought his first independent pharmacy, a number signifying self-reliance. The door clicked open. I reached in and pulled out 3 items, one after the other. First, a sleek titanium feel credit card fresh from its sleeve. It caught the light, gleaming with cold, new potential. It was embossed with the name Messrs. Rhea Kapoor. Second, a thick, folded sheaf of paper, not a casual handful, but a dense stack, held together with a heavy black clip. The top sheet was a statement, rows and columns of data in small print. Third, a small, unassuming USB drive, silver and anonymous. I carried them to the solid rosewood coffee table, the one his father had lovingly restored, and placed them in a neat line. The card, the papers, the drive. I arranged them with the care of a curator placing artifacts. Then I sat in the armchair opposite him, the table between us like a chessboard. Arjun stared at the trio, his anger momentarily supplanted by confusion. What is all this? I gestured to the new card. "That is a brand new credit card. A primary card, not a supplementary one, issued in Ria's name, with her own credit history attached to it. It has a limit of 8 lakh rupees? His eyes widened. 8 lakh was significant, more than generous. His shoulders, held up near his ears, dropped a fraction. The narrative in his head was trying to recast me from villain to overly indulgent matriarch. But his gaze flicked to the thick stack of papers, and the confusion deepened. "Then why?" he began, but I held up a hand, my smile gone, replaced by a gentle, implacable seriousness. "I changed the password on the old supplementary card," I said, my voice clear and measured, "because it reached its sanctioned limit exactly 3 months and 2 weeks ago, the last transaction that went through. On that card was a pair of golden earrings from Tanishq for 17,000 rupees. A birthday gift for her sister, I believe she told you." Arjun blinked. He remembered the earrings. Ria had been thrilled with her find. Since that day, I continued, tapping the stack of papers. Every single purchase, every lehenga, every serum, every spa day, every dinner at Mass Square, the bill for 2 exceeded 20,000 rupees has not been on the supplementary card. It has been charged silently and without any notification to her phone, to my personal emergency reserve card. I let the words hang. The term emergency reserve did its work. He knew what it meant. It was the card linked to the fund his father and I had, painstakingly built over decades, meant for medical crises, for catastrophic repairs, for the true sharp corners of life. It was the financial equivalent of the fire axe behind the glass. Break in case of absolute need. His mouth opened, closed, his throat worked. The red was draining from his face, leaving a pallid, waxy hue. "No notification?" he finally managed. "None." The supplementary card alerts were set to her number. The reserve card alerts come only to me. So when she was happily spending, receiving confirmations and shipping notices, she had no idea the well had run dry months ago, and she was now tapping into a different aquifer entirely. My aquifer. I leaned forward and slid the stack of statements towards him. "These are the statements for the original supplementary card, from the day it was issued 14 months ago to the day it was maxed out." And then I pointed to the USB drive. "This contains a PDF, screenshot by screenshot, of every single transaction that has appeared on my reserve card for the past 12 months, itemized, timed, dated, including, of course, all the purchases made in the last 3 months. After the card she thought she was using was, for all financial intents and purposes, a dead piece of plastic." I picked up the USB drive, holding it between my thumb and forefinger. It was so light, yet it contained such weight. "The patterns are very interesting, Beta. Once you sort the data, a lot of activity between 2 and 4 a.m. insomniac shopping, perhaps? Specific high-end brands. Not just clothing, but hotel bookings in Goa under her name. For weekends, you were supposedly at a tech conference in Bangalore. Quite a few charges from a boutique gentleman's outfitter in Marol. I don't recall you wearing those labels." The silence that descended then was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical entity, thick and viscous, filling the room, pressing against the windows. It was the sound of a carefully constructed world cracking along its fault lines. Arjun's eyes were locked on the USB drive as if it were a venomous snake. All the blood, all the fight had left him. He looked hollowed out. "The new card in her name is real," I said, breaking the silence but not its density. "She can activate it today. She can spend on it. But there is a key difference." I leaned forward, my gaze holding his. "Every single rupee spent will be visible, only to her and to the physical bank statement that will come to this house, to this address, every month. It will land on this very table. No more surprises. No more secret midnight runs on my life savings. No more mom blocked the card drama. From now on, it's full transparency. Her name, her credit, her statements coming home to roost." I leaned back finally, and reached for the cup of chai that had been cooling beside me. I brought it to my lips and took a slow, deliberate sip. The familiar, spicy warmth was a comfort, an anchor in the surreal scene. I was no longer just his mother. I was the accountant of his marriage, the archivist of its excesses. "So," I said, placing the cup back on its saucer with a soft clink, "you can go tell your wife she is welcome to shop. Truly, the card is there. The limit is more than fair. But from today onwards, darling." I met his shattered gaze, and my voice, though quiet, was absolute. "She shops with her own name, and with the full, unforgiving daylight shining on every single receipt." Arjun stared. His eyes traveled from the gleaming new card that was not a gift, but a guillotine, to the damning stack of papers, to the tiny silver drive that held the ghost of his wife's secret life. Then his gaze lifted to me, and I saw the boy I knew buried under the rubble of the man. I saw confusion, horror, dawning comprehension, and a shame so profound it seemed to physically shrink him. He opened his mouth. A dry click came out. He tried again. Nothing. The words that had flown so readily, the accusations, the defenses, the demands, had abandoned him. They had been built on a foundation of sand, and I had just let the tide come in. For the first time since he was a teenager, caught in a foolish lie. My son, my eloquent, argumentative son, had absolutely nothing to say. The shout was gone. In its place was a vacuum, a silent scream of realization. My eyes drifted to the bay window. From here, I could just see the edge of the driveway, the sleek bumper of their imported SUV gleaming in the sun. Ria was in there, waiting for her knight to return, victorious, with the spoils of Wera reinstated card, a chastened mother-in-law. But the battle had taken an unforeseen turn. The fortress she was besieging had secret tunnels she never knew existed. I took another sip of my chai, the taste of ginger and cardamom sharp and clear on my tongue. Somewhere in the car outside, I was sure, the performative crying had suddenly, mercifully become very, very quiet. Moral of the story: sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't declared with a shout or settled with a scene. It is instead a quiet, meticulous ledger. It is the patient gathering of evidence, the forensic accounting of the heart, and the calm, irrevocable act of handing someone a mirror, not to their face, but to their own signature on every dotted line. It is the profound power of a truth that needs no volume, because it is very, very well documented. Epilogue: the unfolding of ledgers. The silence in the wake of that afternoon did not end when Arjun stood up, wordlessly collected the new card, the statements, and the USB drive, and walked out, closing the front door with a soft, definitive click. That was merely the end of the overture. The real symphony of consequences played out in the weeks and months that followed, not in dramatic confrontations, but in subtle, seismic shifts. Arjun did not call me for 9 days. When he did, his voice was stripped bare. All the entitled bravado sandblasted away. He didn't mention Ria. He didn't mention the cards. He asked haltingly if I would teach him how to make his father's favorite Rajma Kawal, the way only I made it. He came over on a Sunday afternoon, alone. We stood in the kitchen, the air rich with the smell of cumin and garlic. He asked me questions about the fund, the emergency reserve. How long had it taken to build? What had we sacrificed for it? His father's decision to turn down a lucrative but unstable partnership to keep his government jobs security made new sense to him. My own decades of meticulous budgeting, of saving the latte money long before it was a financial guru's mantra, were no longer boring old person habits, but the brick and mortar of a safety net he had nearly shredded. He took the USB drive, I don't know what conversation he and Ria had after he plugged it into his laptop. I never asked. Some fires must burn in private. But the evidence was irrefutable, not just the hotel bookings, but the recurring charges for dating apps disguised as gaming subscriptions, the florist deliveries to an unfamiliar address, the tickets for two to a music festival where he'd been told she was going with her college girlfriends. The digital paper trail was a heartbreak in spreadsheet form. Ria, for her part, activated the new card. The first statement that arrived was a thing of profound psychological restraint. A few cautious purchases from Nika, a bill from Fabindia. It was as if the very visibility of her name on the statement, the knowledge that it would land on my table, acted as a potent deterrent. The midnight shopping sprees ceased. The flamboyant social media-ready hauls stopped appearing on her Instagram. The card was used, but it was used like a normal person's card for groceries, for fuel, for the occasional piece of clothing. The thrill of the secret parasitic spend was gone. She was shopping with her own name now, and the name, it seemed, carried a weight she had never anticipated. She did not come to the house for over a month. When she did, it was for Arjun's birthday. She was subdued, her expensive clothes hanging on her as if she'd borrowed them from a more vibrant version of herself. She offered me a box of Mythi, her eyes not meeting mine. There was no venom, no performance, just a deep, weary weariness. The power dynamic had irrevocably changed. I was no longer the potential obstacle to her desires, but the keeper of a ledger that could shatter her world. I accepted the sweets with a polite thank you and asked her about her mother's health. We engaged in the shallow, careful dance of people who share a profound secret that must never be spoken aloud. Arjun started coming over more often, sometimes with excuses, sometimes without. He'd bring his laptop and work at the dining table the way he did in university. We'd share meals in comfortable quiet. He began asking about investments, about fixed deposits, about the difference between term and whole life insurance. He was rebuilding his understanding of the world from the ground up with a new, hard-won respect for the architecture of financial and emotional security. One evening, about 3 months after the revelation, as I'd come to think of it, he was over for dinner. We were clearing the plates when he stopped, a dish in his hand, and looked at me. His eyes were clear, if sadder. "You must have been so angry, Mom," he said quietly. "All those months, watching it happen. Why didn't you say anything sooner?" I finished stacking the plates and wiped my hands on a towel. Just as I had that fateful afternoon, I considered his question. The anger had been there, yes, a cold, simmering fury at the entitlement, the deceit, the erosion of everything his father and I had built. But stronger than the anger had been something else. "I wasn't just angry, Beta," I said finally. "I was waiting." Waiting for what? For her to spend more? "No," I said, shaking my head. "I was waiting for you. I was waiting to see how long it would take for you to look up from your own life, from the story she was feeding you, and see what was happening right in front of you. I was waiting for you to ask a question, to notice a discrepancy, to be my son and your father's son, a man who values facts over drama." Every month that passed, I added another page to the file, and my heart broke a little more. Not just because of the money, but because you weren't seeing. He flinched as if I'd struck him. It was the truth, and it was more painful than any accusation about money. "I couldn't just tell you," I continued. "You would have dismissed it as me being controlling, not liking your wife. You had to see the evidence for yourself. You had to hold it in your hands. Sometime, Bete, people need to stumble upon the truth in a locked safe behind an ugly painting. They won't accept it if you simply hand it to them at the door." He nodded slowly, the weight of his own blindness settling on him. It was a heavier burden than any credit card debt. The financial cost was significant. The amount spent from the reserve fund was the number that still made me catch my breath in the dark of night. I would be recouping it for years from my pension. But as I watched my son slowly reemerge from the fog, becoming more thoughtful, more grounded, more present, I knew it was a price I had chosen to pay. It was the tuition fee for the most brutal, most necessary lesson of his adult life. Ria and I have reached a tense, distant detente. We exchange polite greetings on family Zoom calls. She sends a generic greeting card on festivals. The new credit card statements continue to arrive, each one a monument to restrained, unremarkable spending. They're no longer a source of anxiety for me, just a monthly administrative task. The drama is gone. The silence that replaced it is not the silence of a happy family, but it is the silence of truth acknowledged, of boundaries firmly, if devastatingly, drawn. Sometimes, revenge is not about causing pain, but about stopping it. It's not about winning a battle, but about ending a war of attrition by revealing the true map of the battlefield. My revenge was not in humiliating Ria, though humiliation was an inevitable byproduct. My revenge was in reclaiming my sons, mine from a fairy tale, and introducing him to the sobering, essential language of reality. It was in replacing the loud, performative tears with a quiet, durable truth. And in the end, the most valuable thing I documented was not her spending, but my own capacity for patience and my son's capacity to finally, blessedly see.